Welcome to this video, and in this video we're going to have factoring perfect square trinomial. Now in factoring perfect square trinomial, we need to identify what is a perfect square trinomial. When we dissect now an expression which is a trinomial, there are parts that we could have in context in this video. The first one is that we would like to look at now a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So this is now a trinomial where a squared is the first term. You can see this is the first term. The plus minus 2ab is the middle term, and then b squared is the last term. So, when you analyze that, both a squared, the first and last term, have the same sign. It's either both positive or both negative. However, in the middle term, it could be plus or minus. It depends upon the structure of the expression. Now, once again, if you want to get now a characteristic of a perfect square trinomial, the first one should be a trinomial. So technically, we're talking about a trinomial, so it should have three terms. Next, the first term should be a perfect square. Another thing is that the last term should be a perfect square as well. And then the product of the square root of the first term and last term multiplied to 2 is the middle term. So this is the process that would confirm if it is a perfect square trinomial. Now, let's look at now an example. So, when we have that, let me just change color of pen. So, we need to identify now our first term. So, our first term is x squared. Our last term, so we're working on the process. So, last term is 9. And then the middle term is 6x. Now, checking now on this one. So, first thing is that you get now the square root of x squared. Square root of x squared, technically, so it's x. So, it confirms now our first characteristic, which is trinomial. Then the second one is perfect square. Next, what is now the square root of 9? That would be 3. So, it's working. Now, this is now the final to confirm now your concept. Now, we get now the product of the square root of the first term and the last term. So we have now the product of the first term of the square root. So we have now x times 3 multiplied to 2. So that's the 2 should be equal to the middle term, which is 6x. So we have now 6x. So therefore, it's correct. So we can conclude that the latter part is that we could say that x squared plus 6x plus 9 is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, let's have another example. So here, other example, we have this. 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. Again, let's look at now our analysis. So this is only happening in your brain. So we get now the first term, last term, then the middle term. So let's have some analysis of this one. So we have now 4x squared. We have 25 and then negative 20x. So working with that, the first thing that you need to get is the square root of the first term. So getting now the square root of 4x squared. So we identify that is 2x. So it means it's perfect square. Good job. So we get now the square root of 25. That could be 5. So another is that we need to multiply 2x times 5 times 2 is equal to 2 times 5, that's 2x times 5 is 10x times 2, that will be 20x. Technically, you might get confused because here it is now negative, but we disregard first the sign. However, it would have a factor when you do, have as implication when we do the factoring. As of now, we get the absoluteness. If they are the same in the absolute value, it's okay. So this would confirm that, so we can conclude that 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, now let's have another example. So another example here is 49x squared minus 7x plus 1. So once again, in your analysis in your brain, let's start now with the first term, identifying the first term. Last term, then middle term. So your first term is 49x squared. This is 1. And then this is negative 7x. Now implication, let's do the testing. First one, square root of 49x squared. That is 7x. Square root of 1 would be equal to 1. So I think we're good with that. Let's try now the middle term, which is 7x times 1 times 2. Always remember the 2 twice is equal to 14x. So this is correct for the first term. This is correct. However, as you can see, this is not. So therefore, if it's not, we can conclude that 49x squared minus 7x plus 1 is not a perfect square trinomial. Okay, I think we're good. Now, let's look at now how to factor a perfect square trinomial. If you identify already that it's a perfect square trinomial, we call this one, let me change the color of my pen. We call this one as square of a binomial. Okay, when you observe this one, if it's plus minus and then this will minus plus. So, no, I think I got it incorrectly. So we have this one, let me erase that. It's still plus minus. So there is an implication of that. Let's have now an example. First thing, so we're doing now confirmation if x squared plus 12x plus 36. So let's do now our analysis like what we did earlier. So what is your first term? The first term is x squared. Last term, that is 36. And then the middle term, let's do the testing. So that is 12x. Now, implication, it implies that then we're getting now the square root of x squared, which is equal to x. So it's a perfect square. Next, square root of 36. So we got 6, that's correct. Now, the third term, you get the x, multiply by 6, then always remember make it twice. So the correct answer is 12x. Therefore, we can say that this is now a PST or perfect square trinomial. So therefore, we can answer that. It confirms that this is a PST. Square trinomial. So therefore, when you factor that, you'll get now one grouping symbol, which is what is the square root of x squared? Square root of this one is x. What is the square root of the last term, which is 6? And then what is the sign of the middle term, which is plus? And then you get in the square. Another way to write that is when you expand out the square of binomial, which is x plus 6 times x plus 6. So it's either of these two are your answer. Okay, let's have another example. Now, first thing you need to test it if it's a PST. So once again, check your first term, which is x squared. Last term, which is 16. And then middle term for trial. No, testing rather, which is negative 8x. Implies that you get now the square root of x squared, which is x, so it's a perfect square. Next, implying square root of 16, that will be 4, correct. And then we do the testing. Square root of the first term, which is x, times the square root of the last term, which is 4. And then twice, the answer is 8x. Again, disregard first the sign if you're doing the testing of the PST. So if it is now, it is a perfect square trinomial. This is only happening in your brain. So if it's a perfect square trinomial, therefore, it's much easier for us to do the factoring. So once again, get the square root of this one, which is the answer is here, x. And then what's the square root of this one, which is 4. And then the sign of the middle term, minus. So this would be the answer. It's a square of x minus 4. Or you can expand that to x minus 4 times x minus 4. So this is now the factor. It's either of these two are your answers. Okay, another one. Let's factor this one. I think this would be my last example. So let's try this one. Let's go with the first term. The first term is 4x squared. Last term is 49. And then middle term is 28x. Now, checking now its implication. It implies that. Let's see now the testing. First one, you get now 4x squared. So the answer is 2x. Square root of 49, that is 7. Let's do the testing. The square root of the first term, which is 2x, multiply to the square root of this last term, which is 7, times 2. You need it twice, so 2 times 7, that's 14x, times 2, that will be 28x, which confirms that first term is a perfect square, last term is a perfect square, that the product of the square root of the first and last term multiplied to 2 is the middle term. So that's correct. Now, so it is a perfect square. Now, if it's now a perfect square, it's now easily now to factor this one. So what is now the square root of 4x squared, which is you have this on your testing, so that's 2x. The square root of 49, which is 7. And then what's the sign of the middle term, which is plus. And then you make it square. Another way to write your answer is 2x plus 7 times 2x plus 7. We call the answer when we factor a perfect square trinomial a square of a binomial. That's it. So I hope you learned something with this video, and that's how you factor a perfect square trinomial.